All right, we're going to look at the rating tool. This will be the third video of 4 that looked at the rating tool. The first one looked at operations and structure. A second one looked at the core team and specialist team. This one's going to touch on items in core practices, evidence-based practices, and the person-centered planning practices. Except we won't be getting into the full responsibility items. That will be our last video. So let's jump to core practices. Again, we are looking at a fake team that has technically already gone through its ratings, hence why it's crossed out. But let's pull up what we found in their charts. Community-based services, this is chart-based data. It pulled it straight from that tally sheet, and eTMACT gave the rating, and you're just clicking confirming, adding notes. If you need to see chart entry summaries, you can click this, and interview responses up here. A PDF for the rating guideline that comes out of the standard eTMACT lives in this PDF. CP2, assertive engagement mechanisms. Here you are clicking through, given the data that you have, what appears to qualify for full, partial, or no credit. So again, easy access to what you saw in the charts and what you captured in the interview. And as you pick this, it will result in the appropriate selection below. So here it turned to a 3. If I move this to full, it's going to turn it back to a 4. You click blue to confirm your choice, which is what gets recorded in the consensus tool. And as a reminder, if you write notes in here, which we encourage because that shows up in the consensus tool and will be helpful when you're discussing different ratings and coming to consensus. If you write notes and then go and hit a click, it's going to erase the notes. You have to write your note and then click save to capture it before you click anything. Intensity of services is straightforward. It's pulling this data in from the charts, and you're clicking to confirm to record your entry. This is one of the very few items where you could apply does not rate. The only reason why you would use this is because the documentation did not clearly capture the direct care minutes in the manner that we need to calculate this item. The most typical example of this is when they're recording the travel time without the individual along with the direct care time, and we don't know, there's no way to tease that out. So you would hit a does not reply because the data are invalid at that point. Frequency of contacts, pretty straightforward. Calculating that output, and then we're selecting and confirming. Again, if data look incorrect, go back to the source to figure out what's creating the weird output. So in this case, we need to go back to that chart data. I would start with going to the log, reviewing frequency. If something stands out as odd, not that anything I'm about to select here, it's all random, but if something's odd, then I go pull that ID up and review what's in here to try to understand what happened. An example of this could be when somebody's not accurately using our inclusion exclusion, and that's throwing off our findings. Natural supports, this is pulling this from the client survey. We also, with frequency of contact with natural supports, it's primarily by the survey, but we also have data we are capturing here. Chart log entries to see, do we have documentation of them working with natural supports, and what did that look like? This is where it matters to be thorough when you're filling out the charts and making the decision on whether evidence of natural support is showing up or not. crisis services. It's going to bring in data that we found in the review of those 6 charts. You can jump to that tally sheet if you need to look at what we found, which will be recommended to get some of that qualitative data. And then you're making decisions, clicking through again. And as you click, the rating may change. See how that dropped it to a 2. But whatever it recommends, if it looks accurate, you're confirming before you move on. Now I'm going to move us to evidence-based practices, starting with integrated co-occurring. And just the same with clicking through, there are some tips in here reminding us we're reviewing and assessing the overall practice of the team. Similar with supported employment, giving a similar reminder. And we have access to that data up here. We're getting some outputs to remind us about the percent in competitive employment, going to school, of those working, the percent of clients who got the job with the team's help. That information is information to help us think about how we would give credit. One thing that we eventually want to better address in our rating guidelines that I'll just say here. These items, when you read no credit, sometimes the no credit wording is really emphasizing kind of poor work, like doing what you shouldn't be doing. What it's not fully capturing is when you're just not seeing anything. The absence of practice really often fits more with no credit than partial credit. So it's a consideration. These are rating examples and guidelines. They are not exhaustive, but I think something that we've recognized is in this item and integrated co-occurring disorder is that we're missing language to capture when you just really aren't seeing much of anything. Okay, engagement, that's psychoeducation with natural supports. Again, go back to those chart summaries, look at what you're seeing in terms of the examples in practice here. And your interview responses, what were folks telling you across the different sources? And then you're making your rating. And then we have psychotherapy. Similarly, our charts have this tab where we can review examples. I would pull up possibly to see what the psychiatrist, psychiatric care provider got credit for. Any brief therapy too is just another data point, but ultimately you're looking at some of the output here and then the interview data to make a judgment. This is coming from the client survey in terms of the percent of people the team said were getting therapy, at least from the team in the past year. And then finally, housing pulls a lot of data that's coming from the client survey as well. There's some tips built in here to remind us of some rules, and you're just clicking through. And then finally, the PP subscale. It's short, but it's powerful. Important things in here. We're pulling this data in from chart log tally 2 right here. And then we're making judgments. Nothing's being selected. We have to make the selections. And then it's all programmed on the output to tell us what it would be. Oh, actually, I take that back. This one does come from the chart log tally too. So they're pulling in, did we see strengths informing the plan? This is one where I want to see the examples because sometimes generous credit is being given here when I'm not seeing examples to back it up. So I might want to go back and read what were the examples because you're prompted to give them if you say yes. PP2, all just going through and clicking. This is hopefully something you were able to observe. So your responses may live in this non-interview sources where somebody has captured what they observed if they sat in on a planning meeting. And then life domains. This one is wonderful because eTMACT just pulls it all in for us and chooses what it should be given that output. So this one is one where, sorry, it's snagging me up here, but it chooses this because this is all very quantitative data driven. And then PP4 is the last one. It's going to give you some output to consider. This is not drive a rating. We just want it on the dashboard to look at it, because if it looks pretty extreme use of different types of different experiences the clients may have that could be coercive and controlling, we want to call that out to be looked at. And then again, you're looking at interview responses, examples potentially from chart. This is where you would hope to see any tagged information too along the way, and it's toggled to pick the right one. All right, one last thing to consider. Through the chart review and the interview, there are opportunities to tag it, where you're seeing information that's relevant to the rating of a specific item. And you want to make sure that information gets tied to that item too, so you can consider it when making a rating. Now, one thing that we will try to update down the road is where this information shows up. So for instance, let's say I recall that I had tagged some information that was relevant to the item of PP4. Now that information isn't showing up here. It's not in the chart entry summary, and it's not in the interview responses either. Where it currently lives for tagged information is going to be back in the interview tool itself. So I find PP4 on any list, it doesn't matter who it is, right here. And do you see that now we have this accordion bar called tags? This is bringing over information that was tagged in the chart log entry that's relevant to client self-determination and independence. So it came from a different source. Here in assertive engagement, we had from another interview a tag of assertive engagement information. So eventually we'll see if we can work this into the interview response document, because that's what we're trained to look for, that information to come through. But it does live in the interview tool under tags for now.